Most students who study hard still forget most of what they read within a week. Not because they're not smart. Not because they didn't try hard enough. Because the method they're using was never actually designed for the human brain. In the year 1000 AD, in the city of Hamadan in Persia, a 21-year-old had already memorized the entire Quran, mastered every branch of Greek philosophy, and was being called in to treat a king when the royal physicians couldn't figure out what was wrong. His name was Avicenna. He wrote 450 books. His medical textbook was still being used as required reading in European universities 600 years after he wrote it. Not as history. As an active textbook. He left behind exactly how he learned. And when modern neuroscientists started running memory experiments in the 20th century, they kept finding the same thing. The methods that actually worked weren't new. They matched what Persian scholars had been doing for over 1,000 years. We stopped teaching it. Then we forgot it. Here's exactly what they knew. Let's start with the one that sounds wrong. Almost every student opens a book at chapter 1 and reads forward. That's also what Avicenna called the least efficient thing you can do with your brain. Persian scholars trained at Gondishapur, a university in southern Persia that was the intellectual capital of the ancient world for 400 years, read the end before the beginning. The conclusion first. The summary first. The destination before the journey. Your brain doesn't store information the way a hard drive does. It stores everything by connecting new things to things it already knows. When you open chapter 1 of a book you've never seen, your brain has no skeleton to attach anything to. The facts float. They're not anchored to anything. So they fall out. When you read the end first, you build the skeleton before you add the bones. Now every fact you read has somewhere to live. Here is exactly how to use this. Pick up any book you're studying. Don't open chapter 1. Read the table of contents all the way through. Then read the conclusion. Then go back to chapter 1. You're no longer reading to absorb. You're reading to fill in a map you already built. I started doing this with dense material I used to read 3 times before it made sense. Reading the conclusion first, I was getting it on the first pass. The material didn't change. The skeleton did. The second method is the one Avicenna wrote about most directly. Every Persian scholar at Gondishapur was required to teach what they had just learned before they were considered to have actually learned it. Not after mastery. Immediately after reading. You explain it out loud, to another person, in writing, or to yourself. Here's what happens when you try. You think you understood the paragraph. You open your mouth and you stumble. The gaps show up immediately. The part you can't explain is the part you don't actually know. Modern neuroscience calls this the protégé effect. When you expect to teach something, your brain processes it at a deeper level automatically. Studies show you retain 28% more when you study expecting to explain than when you study expecting a test. Here is exactly how to use this. After every major section, close the book. Explain out loud what you just read as if you're talking to someone with no background. Use a voice memo if it helps. The parts that come out smoothly are in your memory. The parts where you stumble are your actual study list. Open the book, find those parts, close it, try again. Persian scholars called stumbling a gift. It tells you exactly where to go back. The third method is the one modern students almost never use, and the one modern neuroscience calls the most powerful memory technique that exists. Persian scholars in the Zoroastrian tradition before Islam had to memorize thousands of lines of scripture called the Avesta. Completely orally. Writing was not trusted as a primary storage system. A text in a book could be destroyed. A text inside 10,000 human minds could not. So they encoded everything through movement. While reciting, they moved. A deliberate rhythm of movement while the words were spoken. Walking in patterns. Rocking. Swaying. The body and the memory were coupled on purpose. Modern neuroscience now knows exactly why this works. When you move while learning, you increase BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essentially fertilizer for neurons. New connections form faster and hold longer. A Stanford study found that walking while engaging with material increased retention and output by over 80% compared to sitting still. Avicenna himself mentioned walking while reciting as a standard part of his daily practice. Here is how to use this. Don't study your hardest material at a desk. Read it one sitting. Then stand up, put the book away, and walk while you explain it out loud to yourself. The movement is not a break from studying. The movement is part of the encoding. The fourth method is the one that separates people who pass tests from people who actually build knowledge. Persian scholars at Gondishapur had a rule. Every new piece of knowledge had to be connected to 3 things you already knew. One connection is a coincidence. It might just be surface similarity. 2 is a pattern, stronger but still fragile. 3 is a principle. By the time you found a third connection in a third domain, you understand something at the level of structure, not just content. Imagine you just learned that people are more likely to buy something that others have already bought. One example, people choose the packed restaurant over the empty one next door, even if the food is worse. 2. Students pick the textbook with more Amazon reviews, even if the other textbook is better. 3. Teams believe a plan is sound when more colleagues agree with it, even when the data says otherwise. 3 examples, 3 domains. Now you don't just know the fact. You know the principle. You'll see it everywhere for the rest of your life. Here is exactly how to do this. Every significant idea you read, before you move on, ask 3 questions. Where have I seen this before? Where does this show up outside this topic? Where is the opposite of this true? The harder you hunt, the deeper the memory goes. The 5th method is the one Avicenna called the most important. And it's the one we abandoned completely. Persian scholars did not review new material the next day. They reviewed it 3 days later, then 7 days later, then 14. Each review was short, just a check. Can I still recall this? If yes, they extended the gap. If no, they shortened it. This is spaced repetition. Modern neuroscience treats it as the most effective memory technique ever documented. Hermann Ebbinghaus mapped it with data in 1885. Avicenna was running it by habit 1,000 years before that. Here's why it works. Every time you successfully pull something out of your memory, the trace gets stronger. Not when you reread it. When you retrieve it yourself. Rereading is passive. Recalling is active. The effort of pulling it from your brain is what builds the path. Most students do the opposite. They read a chapter, review it the next morning, review it again the night before the test. They're reviewing when they still remember it, which requires almost no effort and builds almost nothing. Here is exactly how to implement this. After reading something you want to keep, write down 3 to 5 key points. Don't look at them for 3 days. On day 3, cover the notes and recall all 5 from memory. The ones you got, push to 7 days. The ones you missed, review and test again the next day. Keep extending the gap for anything you recall correctly. This is the system Avicenna used. It is also the system inside every serious memory training program in the world today. Here's the whole thing in one paragraph you can use today. Pick up whatever you're trying to learn. Read the table of contents and the conclusion before you read anything else. Then read the chapters. After every major section, close the book and explain what you just read out loud. Move while you do it if the material is hard. Write down 3 to 5 key points and don't review them for 3 days. On day 3, recall them without looking. Before moving to the next idea, find 3 places in the world where the same principle shows up. That's the system. 5 methods. 1,000 years old. Still undefeated. You don't need all 5 today. Pick the one that sounds least painful and start there. The movement one. The end first one. The 3 connections one. One method used consistently will change more than 5 methods used once and abandoned. 5 methods is easy to know. Holding your focus long enough to actually use them is a different problem entirely. Persian scholars trained concentration the same way athletes train muscle. I broke down exactly how they did it in this video. Watch it next.